This is a continuation of my video series on this part right here. If you recall in part 1, I didn't tell you what this was. In fact, I posed the question, could you tell me what this part is? And then I wanted to know if any viewers out there have had a problem with this, because some people have had huge problems with this particular part right here. And in part 2, I'm going to explain what the problem is and kind of tell you why it happens, okay? So we know this is an electrical plug. That's quite obvious. Now I'm going to show you what it plugs into. Here's the next clue. It plugs into this. This is a switch, obviously, but this is, you're probably getting, oh yeah, a lot of you know what this is. You've seen this before. It just plugs right into the back of this electrical switch here. And what is this switch attached to? This switch attaches to the steering lock. So, you know, when you turn the key, you know, the lock releases and it activates the switch, which, you know, activates the starter motor and a lot of other electrical equipment in your car. So if you're having electrical problems, either the starter motor is not engaging all the time and you've troubleshot some of the other issues, or you've got weird electrical problems, or maybe your key doesn't spring back. This is real important that you understand this. You know, I've done a number of videos about the ignition lock and the ignition switch assembly in these old Mercedes. But one thing that's really important is to understand the spring back mechanism that you know, when you start the car, you feel the key engage the starter, and as soon as you let go of the key, it springs back. Well, if it doesn't spring back, you need to know what the problem is. I'm going to show you that right now. If you're having problems with your key not springing back after you engage the starter motor, you need to kind of know where that spring is located. Some people think it's in the lock assembly or in the key tumbler assembly. It's not. Now, of course, obviously it's not in the wiring plug. But the spring mechanism is located in the switch right here. And this is the way you can test it. You can get a screwdriver and use a screwdriver to activate the switch. There, it's in the off position. And when I turn it on, there's the run position. Now watch as I go into the start position. That engages the starter, and watch what happens when I release the screwdriver. See, it springs back. Now I can't immediately re-engage the starter. I've got to turn the key all the way off and then bring it back into the run position, and then once again engage the starter and watch it spring back. So if you're having issues where the key's not springing back, this is the part that you're going to have to replace. If you're having other electrical issues, this may be, not necessarily, but this may be the part that you need to replace. These do wear out and they tend to disintegrate internally. So when you have to replace this, here's where the problem comes with this wiring plug we've been talking about. I've developed a special kit, which is available on my website, which will allow you to go in and replace this switch without having to remove the lock assembly from the steering wheel or from the dash. It was a great time saver. But the downside of it is that you have a very limited space to work, and if you have big hands, it's hard to get back in there, because not only do you have to get the plug out, but you have to get the screws out from this lock housing, and that can be challenging. I've got a little special tool I include which will help you get those screws out, even working blind. But one of the first challenges when you go to replace the switch is getting this plug out. And if you don't remove the plug properly, if you don't know the sequence in which to remove the plug, or you try to force the plug out, or you try to get in there and pry the plug out, guess what happens? If you don't get this plug out, usually what I do is I wiggle it. I don't try to force it, I wiggle it, very patiently, wiggle it, until you get this plug out. But we have received so many emails over the years about people panicked out when they have damaged this. And guess what happens? If you try to force this plug off, or you do not have the key in the right position, if you have one of the older original switches, you can rip the back housing of the plug off. And when that happens, guess what? All those wires come flying out behind the dash, And I'm not going to do that here. I'm going to keep this together because I don't want to lose the sequencing. There's numbers right here. There's different numbers. And there's, of course, color-coded wires, but wiring diagrams on this are very hard to find. And trying to guess what wires go in what holes if you have taken this all apart accidentally can be a nightmare. And from the emails that we have received, we know a lot of people have experienced a lot of pain because this plug came apart on them when they were changing the ignition switch. So you have to be careful. You have to be really, really careful when removing this plug from the back of the switch. Ignition switch, ignition lock, tumbler assembly problems are becoming more and more common on these Mercedes-Benzes that are 1995 and older. And you might be thinking, well, why? Are the parts no good? No, that's not it. Most of these cars have, over 200,000 miles. People just keep driving them, and they're all, 20, 25, 30 years old. That's the problem. And if you are experiencing ignition switch, lock, or key problems, we have all the resources for these old Benz on our website to help you out, including manuals on how to do it yourself. And I even have an on-demand video which goes through the step-by-step process of drilling out a lock assembly that you cannot get the key to turn in. And that's, if I don't, other than warning you about this problem with the plug here, the other thing I want to really warn you about, if you start having sticking key problems, you need to fix it. You need to fix it before the key will not turn, and that will literally leave you stranded. So at the first sign that you're having to wiggle your key or move it in and out and mess with it to get it to turn, that's when you want to fix it. Just, if you don't understand all this, you can go to my website, use a search box, use my tech help section. I have a ton of information on my website about ignition switch and ignition lock problems. So what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to do a little video schematic. I'm going to call it a video schematic because for a number of years I've decided I need to give people a little wiring diagram just in case they rip the back of this cover off the plug and the wires just come flying out. And let me tell you, it's a mess under there because once again, you're working down down inside the cluster hole in the instrument area, and there's just not a lot of room to work or to see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a video schematic that this will be available on my website. It will be a free video which will be linked to a lot of my ignition switch problems. We want to make this available to our customers. Most people don't need to know this. I mean, why would you need to know all this? You wouldn't even remember it unless you actually have the problem. And what I want to be able to do is if people run into this situation when they're replacing their own ignition switch or lock assembly, they can go right to my website, click on the link there, and it'll take them to the video schematic. I'm going to call it a video schematic because I decided it was going to be too much work to draw it all out and put the numbers and show what color wires. I'm just going to take this apart. In the video that you'll find on my website, I'm just going to take this apart and I will call out the color codes of the wires, and I will tell you which corresponding number hole they go to. So if this becomes a problem for you, check this out on my website. If you need any help at all with any of your ignition lock or ignition switch problems, be sure and visit my website, Mercedessource.com. Use the search box. You just put your chassis number or your year model number in the search box and put ignition switch or ignition lock, and it'll show you all the products and solutions that we offer.